It's 37 degrees.
I'm Chris Clevenger, and you're watching Text Message. One of the greatest challenges early in my walk with Christ was the struggle to create and maintain friendships. As sometimes it can be incredibly difficult to find friends who are fun and compatible without forcing you to compromise on something that you believe in your heart. Total dependence upon Jesus Christ and a complete commitment to His cause can impact relationships. It can cancel some, it can strengthen others. And on today's episode of Text Message, we're going to take a look at maintaining our commitment to Christ without compromise while we create lasting friendships here upon the earth. Join us. When I think about commitment to Jesus Christ and then contrasting that with friendships, friendship of the Bible comes to mind. I mean, we could go back to the Old Testament talking about Abraham, who was the friend of God. Or we could talk about the relationships that we see in the Old Testament, whether we had good friends or bad friends. One that comes to mind is Jonathan and David. But I want us to take a few minutes and to think about Jesus in the last hours of His life and how He interacted with three of His closest friends. When I think about the apostles of Jesus, certainly we can name them all, Matthew, and then continue on down through Peter, Andrew, James, and John, Philip, Thomas, Matthew, and we could discuss all of them and how they interacted with Jesus. But in the final hours of His life, there are three characters that come to mind, particularly as it pertains to friendship. The first one that comes to mind for me is Judas. You recall Jesus is sitting there at that final meal, that Last Supper with His disciples, and Judas had already covenanted with the high priest to betray Jesus into their hands. And so Jesus is sitting there, He's eating this meal with them, He's already washed their feet, John chapter 13, and now He looks at Judas and He says, what thou doest, do quickly. And so He arises and He goes and gets the people that He needs to get, and when He returns, He finds Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane. Now He's already told the soldiers and the guards and the chief priest, whoever you see me kiss, you take him, you bind him, you hold him fast, because that same person is Jesus. And so He walks up into the garden and Jesus addresses Judas. Judas betrays Him with a kiss. And we see this whole thing play out where Judas being a follower of Jesus, Judas being what we would suppose previously a friend of Christ, he's completely betrayed Him and given Him into the hands of His enemies. We know what befalls Judas later on. Judas repents, he goes back, he casts the money into the temple, and then he goes out and hangs himself. But when I think about Judas and I think about the friendship that he had with Christ, Judas gave up his friendship with Jesus because of betrayal. And so I think about that relationship of Jesus and Judas, and I know that there are times in my life and times in yours when we think about certain friends and we think about the ways that certain friends have treated us in the past, maybe it's the case that some people have chosen just to completely betray us, to turn their backs upon us and to leave us behind. And there's sometimes, sadly, in my life, if I'm serious with myself, I know that I've done that to other people. I've had a good friendship, I've had a good relationship, but for whatever reason, maybe they said something that I didn't like, maybe they said something that I didn't really agree with, maybe I just wanted to do something else. I left them behind, I betrayed them, and I completely walked away from a friendship without good reason, without good cause, and I possibly injured somebody else. And so when we think about friends, particularly the last hours of Jesus' life, Judas comes to mind, and we know that we can be betrayed by friends, but likewise, we can betray our friends. Now, the second character that comes to mind is Peter, because Peter did something similar to what Judas did, but he didn't go as far as Judas did. Judas betrayed, whereas Peter denied. You remember Peter told Jesus on one occasion, though all men be offended of thee, I'm not going to be offended. I will die for you and lay down my life. And Jesus told him on that occasion, before this night is over, before the cock crows, you're going to deny me 3 times. When Jesus is apprehended in the Garden of Gethsemane, having been betrayed by Judas, Peter follows a long distance off, and he ends up in the court of the high priest, and there around a campfire, he betrays Jesus 3 times. Finally, on that third occasion, Jesus makes eye contact with Peter. Peter goes out and he weeps bitterly because he had denied Jesus. But I'm glad that the story doesn't end there with Peter. Peter, after a series of hours, after a series of days, he's told to come back. After he hears about the resurrection of Jesus, he journeys to the tomb. He sees it empty. He meets Christ. Christ forgives him as they walk around Galilee, and he's restored. And so in just a few chapters after you finish the gospel account of John, you come to Acts chapter 2, and it's Peter who's standing up with the other 11 apostles, and he's preaching the gospel of Jesus. And so Peter, while he denied Jesus. He repented, was forgiven, and came back. And so you've got Judas. Sometimes we are Judases with our friends, and sometimes we feel as if we've befriended Judas. But then sometimes we can be like Peter. We have good friends, and for whatever reason, we may deny them, regret that, try to restore that relationship. And through grace and mercy and forgiveness, we can rekindle that relationship, and we can have that covenant agreement again, and we can have the type of relationship with our friends that we once enjoyed. And so sometimes we're like Judas, we betray our friends. Sometimes we're like Peter, we deny our friends and then later repent of it. But then sometimes we're like this third character I want us to talk about for just a minute. Sometimes we're like John. You know, throughout the whole thing in John chapter 13, the Last Supper, Jesus is there with His disciples, and it's John, the beloved disciple, who's laying on the breast of Jesus. They go to the Garden of Gethsemane, and Jesus is apprehended. And it's not just Peter alone who follows and enters into the court of the chief priest. It's actually John who's there with Him, who does not deny Him, who doesn't leave Him behind. And then just a few hours later, when Jesus is being crucified, He's put up between heaven and earth, and nails are driven through His hands and through His feet. He looks down from the cross, and He doesn't see any of the other apostles, but He sees John. John, throughout the whole process, Jesus' denial, Jesus' betrayal, Jesus' crucifixion, and then later even His resurrection, John is there, and he never leaves Jesus behind. And oh, that we would have friends like John, who wouldn't leave us behind, who wouldn't betray us, or who wouldn't deny us. And oh, that we would be friends like John. We won't deny, we won't betray, but we'll be faithful to the end. Evangelism is the lifeblood of the church. The final command that Jesus gave to the apostles was the Great Commission. Go you into all the world and preach the gospel to every creature. Having been redeemed by Christ, we're compelled to share the good news of salvation with those with whom we come in contact. On this week's Pew Packers, we ask the question, are you sowing the seed of the kingdom, brother?
This next song I want to talk about is Sowing the Seed of the Kingdom.
Okay.
And this is basically coming off of Luke chapter 8, and talking about the parable of the sower. And the whole song is basically kind of a gist of what this parable is talking about. Mm-hmm. So let's look at verse number 1. Are you sowing the seed of the kingdom, brother, in the morning bright and fair? Are you sowing the seed of the kingdom, brother, in the heat of the noonday's glare? And this once again is asking a question to Christians. First off, are you sowing the seed of the kingdom, brother? Because we know that's what we're commanded to do. We're supposed to evangelize and pass the seed, because that's what we were commissioned to do by Christ Himself.
Right.
And so, you know, this song is actually asking a question. First of all, are you sowing the seed of the kingdom, brother? Because that's a command. Mm-hmm. And so it's going off of what Luke chapter 8 is talking about here.
Right. Let's go ahead and read Luke chapter 8. Luke chapter 8, starting at verse 5. It says, and the sower went out to sow the seed. And as he sowed, some fell by the wayside, and it was trodden down, and the fowls of the air devoured it. And some fell upon a rock, and as soon as it was sprung up, it withered away because it lacked moisture. Some fell upon thorns, and the thorns sprang up on it and choked it. Another fell on good ground, and sprang up and bare fruit 100-fold. And when he said these things, he cried, He that hath ears to hear, let him hear. The good thing about some of these parables is that in latter verses, Jesus explains what He meant when He talked in parables.
Yeah, just like in this one.
Yeah, so let's look at verse 11. It said, now this the parable is, the seed is the word of God, like you mentioned earlier. Those by the wayside are they that hear, then cometh the devil, and taketh away the word out of their hearts, lest they should believe and be saved. They on the rock are they which they hear, they receive the word with joy, but they have no root, and for a while believe, and in time of temptation they fall away. And they which fell among thorns are they, which when they have heard, go forth and are choked with cares and riches and pleasures of this life, and bring no fruit to perfection. But on the good ground are they, which are in an honest and good heart, having heard the word, kept it, and bring forth fruit with patience. So our job is to spread the seed, to spread the word, and everybody that we spread the word to is going to have one of these hearts.
Right. I think we should look at these hearts more. Look at verse number 12. The first heart is a wayside heart. Now the wayside heart, just like it says in verse 12, they're going to hear the word. So they're going to listen to what you have to say. They're going to listen to what the word says. Then after they hear the word, then the devil comes and they take the word out of his heart. So they won't believe and so they won't be saved. It reminds me of what Paul, when King Agrippa, he said, after he got done preaching and telling his story and telling, how he was baptized into Christ from what he used to be, he said, Paul almost persuaded me that I ought to be a Christian. Almost. And so King Agrippa was a wayside heart. He heard it. He somewhat believed it, but the devil took it out of his heart and procrastinated him. And so there's going to be wayside hearts. So I think Christ here in verse 11 through 15 is preparing us as the sowers to know, okay, yeah, it's not your job to germinate the seed. It's your job to throw it. And when you throw it, you need to know what kind of soil you're going to throw these seeds on. And so look at verse 13. Now these are the rocky hearts. They're the hearts in which they hear the word, they receive the word with joy. So these are your hearts. You get those people that come up, obey the gospel. They're on fire. They're super, super excited. But they have no root. They think that just because they've been baptized, it's game over. They've won. There's no work. But they have no root, which means they don't study. They don't live the life. They just did the action. And so it says for a while, they believe. So they believe just for a little bit. But it said in time of temptation, which we know temptation will come, then they fall away.
And this is alluding to also, it says they that have no root. It's talking about they don't have a foundation. And that's the importance of us Christians, especially new babes in Christ, to develop that foundation. Because if you put it in worldly terms, if a contractor is going to build a house, he's not going to build a house on a shaky foundation because he knows that he can't build upon a shaky foundation. So that's the same thing in the spiritual sense. If you don't have a strong foundation, you won't be able to build up to greater things.
Exactly. Before we go to 14 and 15, let's look at verse 2. It says, are you sowing the seed of the kingdom, brother, in the still and solemn night? Are you sowing the seed of the kingdom, brother, for a harvest pure and white? And so we know that the harvest is white. The harvest is there for us, but we just need to go and work it. Now look in verse number 14 and 15. This describes two other different hearts. Now 14 is talking about a thorny heart. And they that's which fell among the thorns are they when they've heard the word, they go forth, then they're choked up by the cares, riches, and pleasures of this life, and bring forth no fruit to perfection. So these thorny hearts are those who have obeyed, those who go forth to work, but then while they're working, the cares and riches of this life get to them. And they decide, well, it's not worth it anymore. And so that's the bad thing about the rocky and the thorny heart. The world gets them. And so that's something that we need to guard against, especially against Satan, because he knows he's coming for us. He's trying not to get us to even believe, as you saw in verse number 12. And so that's kind of the importance of what Christ is telling us in verse number 13 and 14.
I actually want to go back to something that you said earlier. You were talking about the harvest. Go to Matthew chapter 9. Matthew chapter 9. I want to start in verse 37.
Okay.
This is Jesus talking to the disciples. It said, he saith unto his disciples, the harvest truly is plenteous, but the laborers are few. Pray ye therefore the Lord of the harvest that he will send forth laborers in his harvest. So here Christ is saying that the harvest is plenteous. So we have a lot of work to do, but there aren't a lot of laborers. So the solution for that is to pray. And that shows the importance and the power of prayer. We're supposed to pray for laborers. Pray for the harvest also. Pray that, like we was going in Luke chapter 8, pray for those good hearts, because those are the ones that are going to germinate the seed.
And speaking of the good hearts, let's look at the good heart in verse number 15. But that on the good ground are they which in an honest and a good heart, having heard the word. So that's the first step. They heard the word just as every other heart did. Every other heart heard it. But this is something different about the good heart. They hear the word, but notice the special word here. They keep it. So after they heard the word, they don't let the world or the devil take it. They hear the word, they keep it, and they bring forth fruit with patience. So they know this is a journey. They know after you spread the seed, you're not going to get instant germination. You know that when you plant a physical plant, it's not going to come up that same hour. It's going to take time, it's going to take care, and it's going to take dedication. And so in verse 15, they said they're going to bring forth fruit because they have a good, honest heart, or they're going to bring it up because they're patient. And so when you spread the word to these different hearts, yeah, this might happen, but you just be patient just a little longer, and that seed's going to germinate.
Right, and like you said, our Christian walk is a process. And, you know, sometimes we're going to struggle through it. Even Christ said, you know, the world didn't like me, so don't expect them to like you either. But I think a person that we can look up to is the Apostle Paul. And I want to look at 2 Timothy chapter 4. 2 Timothy chapter 4 and verses 6 through 8.
Okay.
And this is what every Christian should be striving to say at the end of his life.
Yeah.
Paul said, "For I am now ready to be offered, and the time of my departure is at hand. I have fought a good fight. I have finished my course. I have kept the faith. Henceforth there is laid up for me a crown of righteousness, that the Lord, the righteous judge, shall give unto me at that day. But not to me only, but unto all them that loveth his appearing." So it sounds like a man who was confident in what he did as a Christian. It sounds like a man who worked all his life. And I think Paul is a person that we can pattern our lives after.
I mean, look at the chorus. I think it explains everything here. For the harvest time is coming on, and the reaper's work will soon be done. Will your sheaves be many? Will you garner any? For the gathering at the harvest home. And so you think about, we're working in the field for Christ. We're working, we're spreading the seed. So at the end, he can take all of us back to heaven. Right. Because you know the Father said he's going to send the Son to gather his kingdom. And, you know, I think this is something that we need to think of importance. Because we know that Christ is going to come back. So why not work even harder to get those souls, especially all these hearts, to Christ here? Right. So I think the sowing the seed of the kingdom, brother, I think that's a good question we all need to ask one another. Are you really sowing the seed of the kingdom?
I think so too.
Making friends can be tough. Keeping and maintaining friendships can be even more difficult. God desires for us to make wise decisions concerning those who we consider our friends. The foundations of fruitful friendships can be found throughout the entirety of the Bible. I want us to listen into a conversation I had with Michael Clark on this week's Conversations with Chris.
And I wouldn't know it, but I would be told later that, hey, this kid's not someone you need to hang around with. And that's always difficult. You know, grow up, kindergarten, they say it's easy to make friends. You say, what's your name? Well, my name's Chris. My name's Michael. What's your favorite color? Blue. Mine too. We're best friends.
There you go.
And then you get to middle school, and it's no longer about what your favorite color is anymore. It's about your likes, your dislikes. Do you like the same football team as I do? Do you like the same food as I do? And then that kind of bases your friendship. But then when you get into high school really determines what type of person are you. It's no longer about what food you like, no longer about what football team you like. What type of person are you? Are you a person that meshes with my personality? Are you a person that, as a Christian, is going to help me and not hurt me? Are you a person that's going to understand, if you're not a Christian, that I am one, and that you're not going to say these things around me, you're not going to do these things around me, and you're going to be respective, you're going to respect my beliefs and what I'm doing is with my life. And so the question that I have for you is, who should be my friends? Why should I want to have friends? Things just of that. Who should be my friends? What does the Bible say friendship should be based on?
Okay. Friendship, as far as we can see in the New Testament, as far as we can see in the Old Testament, you look at the Bible as a whole, when you look at the term friendship, you've got a lot of things that come to mind. I think about Jonathan and David. They certainly were friends, and they had a great relationship going on. But then I also think, and this one's a little bit different, about Abraham and God. Abraham's called the friend of God.
Right.
Now, if you're just considering friendship and you ask the question, well, what should friendship be based on? Well, look at Abraham and God. What's their friendship based on? Well, they're mutually committed to one thing, and that's fellowship with the other. And God's mutually committed to Abraham. He made a covenant with him. He made a promise with him. I'm going to be with you. I'm going to take care of you. I'm going to provide for you.
Right.
And Abraham made a covenant with God. I'm going to follow you, and I'm going to let you lead me, and I'm going to let you provide for me. I'm going to trust you. And so they had this agreement where Abraham met God, and God met Abraham, and they were friends. And so that's a very interesting concept when we talk about friendship in the abstract, or specifically when it comes down to our relationships. If I say, well, what is friendship based on? It's based upon what I believe and what I hold and what I want to do. And I'm making a covenant, if you want to look at it this way, with another person. We're going to be friends if, and there's always that condition, if, because friendships can be broken and friendships can be obliterated. And so we're going to be friends if we can come together and meet on this one thing. Now, like you said, sometimes in kindergarten, that's the color blue. You and I are going to come together because we mutually agree to covenant. Our favorite color is blue. Or maybe it's our likes and dislikes, football teams. We're mutually going to come together. We're going to covenant because we both like these football teams. Now, if you leave that football team, we're probably not going to be friends anymore. And it's the same thing in high school. If we can come together and you can believe, not necessarily, maybe not believe what I believe, but respect what I believe, and I can respect you, and we can have conversations, and we can love each other and take care of one another, and then that friendship can exist. And so I would think friendship is based upon, I wouldn't go so far as to say as friendship is always based upon a covenant, but in a very special way, friendship is a covenant. You're coming into this relationship with somebody and saying, this is what we agree upon, and this is what we're going to do.
I think that's a very good point. You said that friendships can be obliterated. They just go cease to exist. And I think it's something that you and I might be able to relate to as well. Growing up, when you have friends that are in school, and you have school friends, and then you leave school, and you move on in life, you move away. Not very many people stay in the same area. A lot of people move away to different colleges, or they move away and get a job. And so you come home, that same friend you might see at the local grocery store, and you don't talk to them. And it might shock you, because it's like, we were such good friends in high school, but what's changed? Your personality, maybe your belief has changed on different things, and that person's so different now, you're so different now, that you just don't talk anymore, you just don't mesh anymore. And I don't know how many friends from high school you could rattle off the names to. I think with Facebook now, it's a little bit easier for some people to remember who they went to high school with because they're Facebook friends. But in all honesty, I couldn't tell you who I went to middle school with. I couldn't tell you who I went to kindergarten with, who were considered my best friends. Not because they weren't good friends, but because it's just been years. I don't talk to them anymore. The friendships kind of withered away. They just
When you
died.
think about it, providentially, it's the case that sometimes people are in our lives for just a season. There are times where we meet somebody and we really connect, but we're only together for a season, and we have this deep friendship, but it doesn't last for a long time. And so God providentially has brought us together. And I can look back on my life and I can say, you know what, there are people that I've met and we spent months or maybe even a year or two together, and they were great friends, but then I moved off, or they moved off, or we just kind of drifted apart. And I don't think that's always necessarily a bad thing. God brought them into my life at a particular season and I needed their friendship. But then there are other friends who are friends for a lifetime, you know.
Definitely.
You've got certain friends, and Melissa J, my wife, she falls in that category. It's not just we've come together for a season. I mean, our lives are conjoined. And we're best friends, and so we love each other and we care for one another, and that's not going to stop. That's going to continue, Lord willing. And so you look at these different types of friendships, and like you said, I went to 9 different schools growing up. I can't tell you the people I went to middle school or elementary school with, but I do know that I had deep, lasting friendships. I think about middle school, and there are 4 or 5 guys I can name that while I was there, for the 4 years I was there, we had great friendships, but it was just for a season, and then I moved off and I went on. One interesting story, my best friend in elementary school, I was living in Tupelo, Mississippi. We lived there for 2 or 3 years. That's where I was baptized. I was 10, 11, 12. And so my best friend in school was Brad McNutt. And Brad McNutt and I, we did everything. We played baseball on the same team. We'd run around our bicycles in the same neighborhood. We got together and hung out all the time. And so we did that. And then I moved off, drifted off. And we didn't talk from the time I was 12 to the time I was 18. 6 years. We didn't talk. We didn't communicate. We didn't have Facebook. And so we didn't know what was going on with the other person. Well, I got to Memphis to go to school, and I started looking down through the roster, and Brad McNutt's on the list. I said, surely that's not the same Brad McNutt, but it was. We had drifted apart. He had decided to go to school where I had decided to go to school. We both went, and we met up and reconnected there, and we've been good friends ever since. And so there are times where we have these friendships that last for a season and then separate, but who knows? Perhaps God providentially is going to bring us back together later for us to reconnect when we need each other once again. And so I trust that God's in control when it comes down to a lot of things, even including friendships. God has the ability to bring certain people in my life when I need them.
You said you make that covenant. It's kind of like a contract too, you know, but unlike sports contracts, you don't know when that contract's up. You don't know when that contract ends. And so it kind of puts an importance on really cherishing the friends that you have, growing up, cherishing and not taking them for granted. and not just saying, oh, well, I mean, if someone says, hey, why don't we go do something, and not saying, I just don't feel like it. If you want to go do something with that friend, take advantage of it, because you don't know. You may not see them the rest of your life. You never know. And they may move away, you may move away. And so it really does talk about how friendship is based on, hopefully, when you get old enough and you're a Christian, the Christian value. And that you make that covenant just like you made with God, with a friend, and saying, look, we're both going to serve God, but we're going to help each other serve God. And so that's one thing. I know the Bible teaches a lot on friendship with David and Jonathan, and talking about how Jonathan disobeyed his own father at times, kept David from being hurt by being his friend, but he loved Jonathan. He loved David, and the friendship they had on that. And so I think that would fall into a good biblical example of friends. But what about, as we are closing up, what about a friendship in the Bible that was not good?
Oh, a friendship in the Bible that was not good. That's an interesting question. I'm going back to the Old Testament. I'm going back to the story of David. I'm going back to Absalom's half-brother, and I can't remember. Anyway, it's left me now. But I mean, you read through the Old Testament, and there are certain friends where one person is going to encourage somebody else to do something that's bad. I'm thinking about Joseph's brothers,
yes.
The 11 other sons, the 10, Benjamin being excluded, who got together and said, hey, let's throw him in a well. I mean, that's not really a great friend there, you know.
Right.
And so they throw him in a well and they leave him, and then they sell him into slavery. I mean, if you hang around with the wrong crowds, they can lead you in the wrong direction. Whether it's false prophets, whether it's half brothers, whether it's friends, whatever the case is, they can lead you in the wrong. By the way, this is probably the eternal symbol for friendship or covenant.
That's
right. All right. So they lead you in the wrong direction. But then you've got to remember, like 1 Corinthians 15:33, evil communications corrupt good morals. You've got to remember what Solomon said: iron sharpeneth iron, so the man sharpeneth the counsel of his friend. You know, we look at these passages and we see all these negative things, and I'm going to kick myself when I realize who that was in the Old Testament I was thinking of. But we see all of these principles and all of these things that come together when we talk about friendships, because there are friends that lead us in the right direction, help make us better people and enrich our lives. But then there are people who we might call friends, who, if we're looking at a biblical definition, they're not really friends at all.
Right.
If somebody's not helping me to be a better person, okay, let me rephrase that. If somebody's hindering me from being a better person, who I'm not helping to be a better person. Sometimes I need to be a friend to somebody else who's not necessarily going to help me, but I'm going to be able to help them. But then there are other times where I need friends to help me. I was reading a book the other day, and they made an interesting concept. They said that every person, particularly they said every man, but every person needs 3 different kinds of friends, at least in his life. He needs a Timothy, somebody who's younger who he can encourage. He needs a Barnabas, somebody on his level who they can talk and converse and be in this battle together. But then he needs a Paul, somebody who he can look up to. And so when I look at my friends, I think about those 3 people, Timothy, Barnabas, and Paul, and try to fit them into that mold.
That's a good point. That's a good thing to do. Definitely. Got to have those types of friends.
Thanks for joining us today for Text Message. I want you, as you go throughout the rest of this week, to think about the type of friend that you are towards other people. And I'm going to think about the type of friend that I am as well. Sometimes we can play the part of Judas. Other times we might play the part of Peter. But we all need to strive to be Johns. Even though when we do make mistakes like Peter did, we need to be willing to say I'm sorry and to seek restitution and to seek this rekindling of the friendship relationship that we have one with another. If you've got any questions or comments about friendship and relationships, you can text those to the number at the bottom of the screen, and we'll try to get to those on another episode of Text Message, where you can be encouraged and uplifted as you walk for Jesus Christ. This week, be a friend and seek out good friends as you seek to follow after Jesus Christ, fulfilling the Great Commission and bringing glory and honor to His name. We'll see you next time.
More about Jesus Congregational. Eternal, we sing Alleluia. Maranatha, sweeter as the years go by. Dallas Christian. Trash. Eternal Father, strong to save. More about Jesus. Nearer, still nearer, sweeter as the years go by. 1,301 songs. App switcher. Tuning radio. Tuning radio. Close tune in radio. Apple folder. Screen recording in progress.